Hey everyone, it's Bill here again, and in today's tutorial I've got another piece for you to look at. This type of tutorial where I put together a short piano piece for you guys, give you the score to download and then talk through how you can work on it for yourselves is increasingly popular. I'm getting really good feedback on this stuff, so I'm planning to make quite a few more of them. Anyway, today's piece has a bit of a Christmas theme because we're coming up to the Christmas holidays, and it kind of has the slightly elaborate title of Impromptu on a Theme from Mendelssohn's Festgesang. Yeah, a bit grand I know, but all that theme is the tune that we most commonly associate with the carol Hark, the Herald Angels Sing. Okay, so really quite famous. And what I've done is kind of play around with it, add some extra harmonies and elaborate on it a little bit and come up with this reasonably short piece of music. An impromptu, by the way, is a very specific genre of piano music, and I'll talk some more about that shortly. Now, those of you who have been giving me feedback on these tutorials, one or two of you have asked for something that's a little bit more demanding. So here it is, yeah? This impromptu isn't madly difficult, but I have made it just a little bit more challenging than usual. If you've worked through my beginners series, then there's nothing here that you won't have come across before, or if you've had a couple of years of piano lessons, you know, but there's nothing really strange here. It's probably kind of, I don't know, grade 4-ish, okay, if you're familiar with the ABRSM piano grades. If you think that's beyond your skill level, don't panic, because in a few minutes I'm also going to talk about some ways that you can kind of simplify it for yourself, yeah, that you can strip it down and make it into an easier performance. But first of all, let's just have a listen to it, okay? It's just a couple of minutes long, and I'm just going to play it through with the score on the screen. Here we go. Okay, so there we go. As I said, if that seems really challenging to you, stick around, because in a minute or two I'm just going to talk about some ways that you can simplify it for yourself, yeah, make it a little bit easier. Just before I do, let me explain what an impromptu is. The impromptu was a really popular genre in the 19th century, and usually it's associated with the piano, yeah, and typically an impromptu is a short piano piece that has the character of an improvisation. Okay, so the idea is that, you know, if you're Schubert or or whoever, you sit down at the piano, you play an improvisation and you jot it down, and there's your impromptu, which is hilarious because this took me about 2 weeks to write. Yeah, so not an improvisation at all, but something that has the style and the character and the kind of free form of an improvisation. In a few minutes I'm going to have a detailed walkthrough of the piece, okay? But first of all I want to make some general points. First of all, about the tempo. At the top we have that tempo marking, freely but not too slow. Really what that's saying is that I want you to use rubato, which is a bit of, you know, kind of flexibility in terms of the speed at which you play the piece. Now typically when you're playing rubato, what you do is you start off at a particular tempo, but you might slow down a little bit and speed up a little bit depending on the expressive demands of the piece as you see them. Okay, it's very much a personal thing. Now, the Italian term rubato literally means robbed, and the idea is that you're, as it were, stealing time from one phrase and putting it in another. What it doesn't mean is that you should start the piece at one particular tempo and gradually get faster and faster or slower and slower. Yeah, it's very much about varying the speed around kind of an average point, if you like. It's quite a tricky thing to do, and playing rubato well is in some ways more difficult than playing to a set beat. If you're in doubt, just look at the way I was doing it, okay? And have a play around with it for yourself. As I say, it's very much a question of slowing down and speeding up, but don't go overboard. Yeah, beginners who play around with rubato tend to be overly dramatic. Yeah, you can be quite restrained and quite thoughtful about it. In the middle section, we've got this other tempo marking, un poco più mosso. Apologies to Italians, by the way. I always get in trouble for mispronouncing your language. I'm really sorry about that. It's a lovely language. I just can't get my mouth around it, yeah? But un poco più mosso means a little bit more. And in that section, it's the one that goes like that. Just up the tempo a little bit. You're still going to be using rubato, but just give it a little bit more of forward drive, as it were. And then when you get to the sections marked tempo primo, first tempo, just go back to the original kind of fairly free tempo. Don't go too slowly, but also resist the temptation, if you're a bit more skilled, resist the temptation to let it really run away with you and get too quick, okay? There's kind of happy medium to find here. Stuff like the phrasing and the fingering is very much advisory, yeah? So use my fingerings by all means, they're the ones that suit me, but if you can think of ones that suit you better, by all means have a go with them. And the phrase markings are just there to kind of suggest the musical shape of the piece. I'm not suggesting, if you know a bit about phrasing, I'm not suggesting that you should try to make every note under each phrase as legato as possible. Yeah, you don't need to do that, but it's just about giving you know, trying to indicate what I think the musical logic of the piece is, okay, in melodic terms. The way you use pedal here is going to be really important. In fact, the way you pedal will probably make or break it. Yeah, there's a lovely quotation from Arthur Rubinstein, the famous pianist. The more I play, the more I am convinced that the pedal is the soul of the pianoforte. Okay, and I think that's really true here. So you do need to play around with your pedal. You need to kind of strike the happy medium between not creating a horrible mushy sound where all the notes run into each other, but also avoiding the kind of bare bones plinky plonky sound. We want something in the middle. Play around with it. It's going to really vary by piano as well, so your piano might pedal slightly differently from mine, so just think carefully about your pedal. Again, we might talk about that again in a bit more detail when we do the detailed walkthrough in a second. If you're thinking, oh my word, this is far too difficult, 3 strategies for simplifying things for yourself. Number 1, shorten it. You could just end the whole piece at bar 23, okay? Just end it on a straightforward G chord, like that, okay? Or something similar, and that misses out some of the trickier bits in the later part of the piece. Second thing you can do is miss out some of the voicings. So in lots of places in the piece, each hand is doing 2 things. You've got one note held down, you know, like a minim held down with crotchets over the top or whatever. What you can do is strip out some of those voicings and just use the outer ones. Okay, so if we look at bar 4, Okay, what you could do there is take out the lower voicing in the right hand, okay, and the upper voicing in the left hand, and just play the outer ones for a result that would be something like this. Okay, so instead of playing all those inner voicings, I'm just playing the outer ones. So that's something you can do as well. Finally, the other thing you could do, and you could do this in addition to that, is play the right hand in full, but just make it a piece for the right hand. Yeah, there's quite a lot going on in that right, so you should find it fairly musically satisfying. If you miss out the left altogether, do give that a go. So let's just have a little bit of a run through and point out some of the individual things that you need to be watching out for. Okay, so we've talked about the tempo marking, and I think the dynamics are fairly clear. Okay, do feel free to play around with the dynamics a little bit. You know, that's the whole point of this kind of quite expressive piece. You don't really need to be really slavish about them. Something you do need to watch out for, and this is evident right from the start, is your intonation, your control on the piano keyboard. Okay, so when you're playing this pattern here, this is what we call an Alberti bass. Okay, this kind of patterned bass. Work really hard on the quality and evenness of the sound that you're making. Now, I'm painfully aware that when I recorded it, I didn't really have enough time to practice, so I was listening back and thinking, oh, you know, intonation's a bit dodgy there. Oh, ouch. Oh, you know. So it's one of those things where you are unlikely to get it perfect, but really good, smooth, rich intonation, a good even sound without sort of clanky notes that pop out at you. That's what you should be aiming for. Okay, so let's just go through from the start here. Okay, so try to be as even as possible. Okay, and also aim for evenness on these dyads and chords. Okay, not easy, especially when you've got two voices going on, or you know, especially in the left here, but absolutely do your best on those. Here we go. What I would do in these, even if you're quite an experienced player, I would really practice separate hands here, actually, because it's very important to get these you know, these double voicings right in the left, especially, which is, you know, for most people a little bit more awkward than the right. And we've got one or two tricky little bits of fingering here. What I've done with fingering in the piece is only made fairly light suggestions. Okay, there are plenty of places where I've left you to work the fingering out for yourselves, because it's going to be quite a personal thing. This one's a bit awkward. We've got a 3 going on to a 4 here, you know, going up onto a 4, so it's a little bit, ooh, ouch, you know, but that's the way I did it. So do work through it separate hands. Let's keep going. Can you hear the bit of rubato that I'm putting in there? Quite steady, quite gentle. Bit of a pause. And then, can you hear that? Just un poco più mosso, just a little tiny bit more. The second time round, I gave it even more than that, actually. But let's just hear it again. Just a bit brighter, just a bit more energy in there, okay? Okay, concentrating on the left hand there. This little quaver run up here, I didn't do any sort of fancy fingering on there. I just jumped pretty much from one to another, and can you hear it's almost kind of semi-staccato? Yeah, and that's kind of the effect I was intending. So don't obsess about getting those smooth. Here we go again. Nice pause there. Just be really careful how you pedal this section. We're quite low down the piano keyboard, and if you made it too mushy, it will get quite crunchy and it will be a mess basically. All this needs to be kept as clear as possible, yeah, which means good intonation on these right hand chords. Don't hit these left hand notes too hard, and just try to keep things clear. Okay, I think I kind of got it all right, but let's have a listen again. And just not too loud. Again, it's tempting there to get really stuck in and get too loud. And that's one of the reasons why I've put the decrescendo hairpin and the P there, or I didn't go quite as quiet as I wanted to there. So yeah, don't go overboard in that section. Bit of a pause. Yeah, ignore the coda sign for now. We're back to tempo primo, the first tempo. So I'm reverting back to a slightly freer, slightly slower. It's quite subtle, okay, and the effect I'm after is quite subtle there. Let's keep going. Growing and growing. Okay, quite big splashy chords there, make a meal of those, but very delicate on these quavers here. And again, growing. Yeah, that's my favourite bit actually. It's kind of the climax of the piece. So go up there, don't make it too crashy, else it would be shrill, that top chord, if you really blasted it at the top there. But grow, 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 F, that's the climax of the piece, and then we're gradual decrescendo down here. Let's just hear that bit again, just because I like it. Okay, just that jump there is quite awkward. It's also quite difficult to keep that G sounding throughout the bar. You need to use the pedal to do that, but then you don't want to get this to get too crunchy. So it might be tricky if you are playing especially an upright piano where the pedal regulation isn't that great. Then you might find you're losing this G halfway through the bar. Don't worry too much about that. Okay, here. But by the way, why have I put these 2/4 bars in? You know, in effect, that there's a pause there anyway, just to suggest a slight shortening, a slight sort of, you know, squashing down of the beat there, even though the beat really goes to pieces in both those 2/4 bars because of the fermata, because of the pause. Okay, so now we've got dal segno al coda. Okay, to the sign and then to the coda when we're told to. So what we do is go back in the score until on the previous page we get to this thing, which is a segno. I said dal segno. Again, my Italian's terrible. Dal segno. There we go, that's better. Dal segno al coda, and there is our segno, our sign. Okay, and we are playing this section again. Now, as I said a few minutes ago, when I got to this section for the second time, I gave it again just a little bit more than I had the first time. Okay, here we go. A little bit quicker, a little bit more energy. Good. It's getting close to being a bit too dark there. Okay, and there, can you see the little coda sign? That means jump the rest of the, you know, the remaining bars and jump straight to the coda at the end. Okay, it's got a nice pause there. Okay, and the point is it needs to be absolutely seamless. So it needs to be like, where are we? Gone from this bar, bum bum but straight into this one, and then back to tempo primo, and this should be really as calm and graceful as you can make it. Do really work on the intonation of these chords, especially the lower one where it can be a little bit crunchy. Okay, let's just hear it again. Where you pedal. Remember, pedal is the soul of the pianoforte, and this is where your pedaling is really going to be tested. Okay, so have a go at it and see how you get on for yourself. If anyone wants to record this, by the way, you know, record it, stick it on YouTube, tag me in it. I'll be fascinated to hear what you make of it. So that's it for this tutorial, and in fact for this year. Big thanks to those of you who have supported the channel during 2018, especially my Patreon supporters and those of you who have bought my books. You guys really help to keep things going. I'd also like to mention those of you who have watched videos, who have liked them, who have added comments, who have made suggestions, who have sent me questions that I've used to make videos. All of that stuff is incredibly useful, and hopefully you'll be pleased to know that I've got loads and loads of interesting stuff planned for 2019. Just before I go, I'll say what I always say. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the red subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of this screen. Check out my books, especially How to Really Play the Piano, but also An Introduction to Cocktail Piano and 7 Studies in Pop Piano. More books coming next year, but we'll talk about that more in the coming tutorials. And finally, if you don't yet support me on patreon.com, my crowdfunding campaign, that would be fantastic. Just $2 or $3 a month makes all the difference. If enough of you do it, as it were, that's the point of crowdfunding, then that really helps me dedicate more time to making these tutorials for you. Okay, there we go. If you happen to be celebrating Christmas, then a very Merry Christmas to you, and I'll see you in the new year.